Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today I'm very happy to introduce you to Reid Tileston. Reid has gone through the ups and downs of business. He's been very successful over the years and has gone from being a triathlete, an Eagle Scout, and numerous other areas. So Reid, I'm very happy to have you here today. And I'd just like to ask you as a first question, kind of to take us through a little history here of some of your successes and maybe some of your challenges.
So for me, Bruce, like the journey into small business started in when I was in high school. I grew up about 15 minutes from San Francisco International Airport, and my older brother, Trevor, this is before the days of Uber, started to give my parents and his parents' friends rides to the airport. And he made pretty good money doing this. But eventually, he went to college and he left. And me, as his younger brother, took over this budding taxi business and started expanding it. I then gave my parents, my friends' parents, friends from church, whole 9 yards, rides to the airport, and they would pay me insane amounts of money. And that's when I learned, Bruce, that this whole idea of the only way to be an entrepreneur is to start something from scratch is wrong. The alternate way to be an entrepreneur is to buy something that already exists and apply the entrepreneurial mindset to it and grow it. I was lucky enough to learn that when I was in high school, and I've been able to apply that over the last 16 years across 4 different opportunities, 4 different businesses to attain a level of success. And ultimately, I decided to write a book, Grit It Done. You can buy it at grititdone.com, that outlines my story and the frameworks for doing this because despite what we hear, the American dream is alive and well. And I would tell you a great way to pursue that, which is a ton of work, and it's not for everyone, to be crystal clear, is to consider acquiring an existing business or buying into an existing franchise system.
Yeah, most people think of the American dream as that of starting a new business, not necessarily continuing an existing business. So that's a very interesting perspective. Can you give us a little more detail about how that it works exactly?
Well, I tell you that the best way to learn that is spend the 3 hours and a couple dollars to buy the book where I outline the 9 steps to it. But the first step in the process is simply assessment. There's 4 avatars. One is you have employees. Employees are great. They're the backbone of every business. The good ones get promoted, and the bad ones, tend to find the door. The second one is what I'll call an equity employee, and that's someone like a CEO, where they essentially work on the business, not in the business. So they're creating equity value. But Bruce, their job is ultimately at the peril of a board. So they don't control their destiny. The third avatar is a business owner. I've been a business owner for many years. I love business owners. You own the upside, you control your destiny. But ultimately, business owners don't always work for themselves. They really work for the business because they spend their time working in the business and not on the business, which limits their level of autonomy and freedom. Then you have entrepreneurial business owners, and that is where you own the business, so you own the upside, you have control, but you also spend your time working in the business or working on the business and not in the business, creating equity value, creating autonomy and freedom, and allowing individuals to live the life they want to, which I would define as the American dream. So let's be clear though, not everyone is designed to be a business owner. Some people are better off as employees, or some people are better off as CEOs. The first step in the process is understanding where as an individual you lie on that spectrum.
So this is interesting. Now, most of the audience here is commercial real estate people. So in some ways, I'm seeing this being very closely related to, say, a real estate owner buying, say, an apartment unit. And in this case, you don't have employees, but you have tenants. So there's probably some very interesting parallels between Grit It Done and what commercial real estate people do in terms of if they own office buildings or retail buildings or even industrial or multifamily buildings. It's all kind of buying an existing business and trying to improve it.
Precisely. And what happens is, there's a lot of opportunities in real estate, but we also have right now is a silver tsunami where so much wealth, like your wealth is going to be transferred on to your heirs, at some point in the future. And there's so many retiring baby boomers that wealth generation, that wealth transfer is happening. And two key components of that are one, small businesses, and we're talking about the trillions of dollars. Of course, real estate's an integral part of that as well. So we just live at a time right now where, given the historical context, it's a really interesting time to be looking at buying existing businesses, particularly those that are being passed from generation to generation as an alternate path to entrepreneurship, as an alternate path to owning a business, and quite frankly, from an investment standpoint, as a interesting opportunity to make investments and just get a good return on your money. So that's how, I think it relates to some of your broader audience in the real estate world.
So you said earlier that, I believe you said Grit It Out was an existing business that you bought?
Grit It Done is the step-by-step to buy a business. The name Grit It Done just comes from, which I outline in the book, one of my, I'll call her an entrepreneurial employee. She was working very hard one night. And this was a really dirty business, by the way, grease trap pumping, industrial services, the gritty work that keeps our great country running. And she was an office worker. She had a very hard task, though, and that was managing QuickBooks, AR with field service management accounts receivable, which sounds easy, I guess, when you say it out loud. It's very difficult in person to do because it requires balancing the books. There's all kinds of technology problems. But one terrible day, she was struggling with it, and it had been just one of those nightmarish days, late at night. But she put her head down, she powered forward, and she got it done. And I was with her, helping her, and I'm like, Marilyn, you really know how to grit it done. And so that's how you said the term out loud. And then one thing I talk about in the book is the power of peer groups. I was at one of my business owner peer groups a couple of days after that, and I was telling that story with that term. And one of my fellow forum mates said, "Grit it done." He's like, "Man, that really describes you pretty well, Reid. Let me go." And he picked up his phone, turned it off airplane mode, and looked online on the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. He's like, "Hey, that term is available. You should totally trademark that." So I did, and when it came time to write the book, that's what I named it after.
Well, that's a fantastic story. So Grit It Done. We all have been there at one point or another where you just have to grind it through and get it done because there's a deadline or whatever has to happen, and you don't really necessarily have the energy to get it done in a good fashion or time to get it done in a good fashion. So you got to grit it done. So any other great stories you have along the way?
Tons of great stories. Depends what you want to talk about.
What
Yeah,
what
go
you'd
ahead.
like to talk about?
I think when it comes to owning and operating small businesses and really just life in general, one thing which I think people don't always talk about with it, that the most fulfilling part of it is not necessarily the money, not necessarily the autonomy. Those things are great. But when it comes to small businesses, it's the people, it's the relationships that get built along the way. Some of the most fulfilling relationships that I've ever had have been with my key team members. And it's relationships that certainly existed when I owned the businesses, but they've existed for years thereafter as well. And that for me is what the real fulfilling part of the journey has been.
Well, that's been a common theme throughout a lot of these podcasts is how do you build trust? And maybe you have some thoughts about that.
One story which I outline in the book, which you can buy at grititdone.com, is when I bought an industrial services business, it had a key team member to it. His name was Tom. When I first met Tom, I was very excited because he was a key part of the business. I'd researched every detail of this individual's life. I knew his address. I knew his credit history. I knew that he had unpaid medical bills from 30 years ago that negatively impacted his score. I had the releases as part of diligence to check this stuff. And I was super excited to meet him. But when I first met him, this is before the deal even closed, he was tough. He was mean. The first thing he said to me was, "What have you done with your life?" As he's like standing up. And what I said is, Tom, it's not about what I've done. It's about what you and I are going to do together. That temporarily placated him, but the only way to answer your question to build trust is what I did over the ensuing years. Actions speak louder than words. The fact that I was moving from California, this business was based in Wisconsin. I was moving across the country. I was putting basically my entire net worth into the deal, and I was personally guaranteeing it. Those actions spoke for themselves, and my dedication and my hard work and my all-in attitude spoke for themselves in the years thereafter. So the way to build trust is through actions. It's almost like parenting, right? You can say one thing, you can do something else. Do as I say, not as I do. Trust comes through action, and that action builds that credibility.
It's so true. And one bad action can lose that trust so quickly. So you build and build and build, and then all of a sudden you make a silly error, and all of a sudden you've got to start rebuilding again. So I think trust is certainly a very key factor to any transaction, whether it's commercial real estate or business, buying an existing business, it all comes together. So this is fantastic. What a great conversation, Reid. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
Yeah, if you want to buy the book, go to grititdone.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me there.
All right. Well, thank you again, Reid, for coming and joining us. This was wonderful.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.